Čujemo te, Mikloše.
Hvala Bogu, hvala Bogu. Ovako, sad ću ja da probam da stavim svoj...
Ne sad. Ne sad, ne.
Dobro.
Sad samo isključi kameru i video i mikrofon, a kad te bude pozvao moderator, onda ćeš pokrenuti prezentaciju ili ćemo je mi pokrenuti, Jasna je skinula, tako da ima.
Dobro, u redu.
Bolje ti da je pokreneš.
Pokušat ću da je pokrenem, ali ako nešto zagusti, onda je tamo to kod vas.
Važi.
Dobro, onda ću ja da sada isključim zbog Jasna. Evo.
Okej.
Good morning, everyone. We can start, perhaps. So, everybody, good morning. This is the second day of the conference, and people who are listening to us via YouTube or via Facebook, you should keep in mind that you can post questions and comments in the discussion section. People who are here, you can also post comments in the chat section, and we will have brief questions immediately after every presentation. But we will have also a discussion at the end, so if your questions don't get answered immediately, then we will answer them later. So Maria it will be the first one with her paper, One Size Fits All, Inverted Rim Balls in the Central Balkans. Maria, you have 15 minutes, and I will write you down when you have 2 minutes left in the chat, so please keep in mind on the time. You can start.
Thank you, Selena. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. First of all, I would like to thank to the organizer of this conference, Jasna and Vesna, for inviting me to attend it. The subject of my presentation are inverted rim balls that show a continuous development since Vinča D phase of late Neolithic and are one of the most characteristic forms of ceramic assemblages. Two additional features are their abundance and high fragmentation rates. It has commonly been assumed, I started everything without sharing my screen, so I'm sorry. I wasn't reminded of. I apologize. I apologize. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen and I'm trying to, this is good. Okay, so two additional features are their abundance and high fragmentation rates. It has commonly been assumed that their primary function was related to the preparation and consumption of foodstuff, and that they played an important role in both daily life and ritual activities. This presentation aims to explore the corpus of inverted rim balls from two late Neolithic sites at the territory of the Central Balkans, Belo Vode and Pločnik, from a functional perspective, focusing on the morphological and formal attributes, use-wear traces, standardization, and contextual data. The site of Belo Vode is located on an elevated plateau at an altitude of about 190 meters in the proximity to major rivers such as Mlava and Velika Morava. The site has a long occupation from the very beginning of Vinča culture until its end. Based on the latest geomagnetic surveys, the size of the settlement is estimated at about 90 hectares. Yet the investigations have been conducted on a very small scale. Recent ones have confirmed that the settlement was enclosed by ditches, which places Belo Vode in the group of fortified late Neolithic settlements such as Stubline, Drenovac, Ujvar, Parta, and probably many others. What, however, sets Belovod apart from other contemporaneous sites is that due to abundant finds of malachite, it is regarded as the so-called late Neolithic center of primary copper production. Among numerous wattle and daub features that were unearthed, so far the most preserved one is the so-called ritual area, which represents Burnhouse remains discovered during the research campaign in 1997. In this area, 3 hearths used for cooking or heating or both have been registered with more than 30 whole or reconstructible vessels seated with them. However, since the most prominent finds from these features are 4 zoomorphic figurines, therefore the entire burn structure is also considered as a type of ritual architecture. The prehistoric site of Pločnik near Prokupje was discovered in 1927 during the construction of the Prokupje-Kušumlija Railroad. In the same year, the first of a total of 4 copper hoards, a corpus of copper artifacts, were found, after which the site became widely known among archaeologists. It's located on the river terrace of Toplica with size of about 35 hectares. While the archaeological material gathered during previous campaigns indicate the presence of late Neolithic and early Neolithic horizons, the settlement of Pločnik is dated to 5,300 until 4,600 Cal BC. The analysis was focused on the pottery from a relatively large burn structure that was excavated in 2010 and 2011 over an area of 15 square meters. What appears particularly interesting is that most of the complete vessels, more precisely 28 of them, were found in a rectangular restricted room, which was dated to the Vinča D horizon, or in other words, the final phases of the late Neolithic at the Central Balkans. As mentioned, inverted rim bowls have the highest frequency among vessel classes in late Neolithic assemblages. Total number of 327 examples has been recovered from Belovod and Pločnik and analyzed over the course of writing my thesis, where 2 assemblages were fully examined. However, although these collections contain a substantial number of inverted rim bowls, some of the common barriers in conducting comparative case studies between local assemblages need to be addressed. These include different degrees of fragmentation of vessels and various post-depositional alterations, among which secondary burning seems to have been largely responsible for changes in vessel color and surface treatment. Medium-sized shallow vessels distinguish themselves from other bowls because they have this restricted orifice. Availability of metric parameters relies directly on the fragmentation rates and therefore varies considerably among 2 assemblages. For example, only 6 whole vessels were found at Belovod. They were weight, rim diameter, the largest vessel diameter, which in this case is a shoulder, and base diameter were calculated. Far more often, however, what we find are pieces of broken bowls, and thus on the majority of the sample, we calculated only the rim diameter and wall thickness. As we can see here, metric parameters are fairly uniform, which cannot be said for capacity parameters. The capacity values are somewhat scattered, and the difference between the minimum and the maximum value is slightly more than 1 liter. These measures indicate that the late Neolithic bowls with inverted rim were not manufactured only in one size. We calculated capacity using AutoCAD. In this particular case, in the case of these particular vessels, it was measured up to shoulder diameter or the maximum diameter of these vessels, assuming that this point most likely represented the level to which the bowls with inverted rim were filled to prevent spills, as Jasna Vukovic indicated already in her papers. Regarding their formal properties, inverted rim bowls are most often fine and coarse sand tempered with well burnished and smoothened surfaces, both inner and outer, and decoration that consists of short horizontal or vertical channeling placed in bands around the rim and often on the shoulder. Since the wide grooves on the outer surfaces that cover the area from rim to the shoulders are most often arranged vertically, we may assume that this type of decoration could have had a functional purpose, for example, to facilitate vessel portability. In addition to channeling, polished or incised markings are also present, although not so often. Those performed by incising are mainly localized on the outside of the base, while polished markings are placed in the central inner part. Both of them are most often interpreted as symbols of ownership under the assumption that they could mark belonging to a certain workshop, potter, or individual. Here we can see that polish marks were applied while the vessel was still in the leather state. First two examples include one simple symbol, while the third represents a somewhat more complex composition, which according to Maria Gimbutas could represent the universal symbol of Neolithic communities. As we know, decoration is the most variable feature of pottery, but it is generally believed that its primary role was to convey messages, and that ornamental motifs that have been preserved may reveal key aspects of community identity and the context in which vessels were used. Also, more elaborate surface treatments are usually reserved for vessels used in context of high social visibility. On the other hand, having in mind that bowls with inverted rim are somewhat uniform, like characterized by uniform metric parameters, and that it may therefore have been difficult to distinguish them at first glance, it is possible that the function of the decoration and the inner part served that particular purpose. For example, I will turn to ethnoarchaeological examples. Among modern potters, there is a common practice of baking their vessels together, which also includes marking in a specific way in order to distinguish them from each other. Finally, some authors, like Jasna Vukovic, have suggested that they may have been used as measuring cups. So it is possible that the signs at the base can also indicate the amount of type of context stored in them. Speaking of challenges, traces, the use where traces on ceramic vessels found in the burnt building horizons are somewhat rare, and when present, their interpretation is highly problematic. On a macroscopic scale, several vessel classes from my sample exhibit traces that indicate different use activities, although they constitute only a small part of an assemblage. On inverted rim bowls, abrasive traces in the form of fine linear scratches, which are found on the entire vessel interior, arranged in regular parallel rows that tend to align with the rim, are somewhat common, again bearing in mind the small sample. They imply contact with soft abraders, scrubbing with hand or sand. In addition to them, there are also smaller chips on the rim of the vessel of different shape and size, which could indicate contact with the ground during washing and rotating on a harder surface, stacking of the bowls during transportation from household to the washing spot, or storing the vessel in each other using lids and other activities, which Professor Skibo actually mentioned all of them yesterday. Finally, as you can see, there is also a dark area along the external base, which resembles the soot traces, irregularly distributed, although the presence of soot is a good indicator of vessel exposure to fire. These alterations do not coincide with the interior, thus we conclude that they represent signs of secondary burning. Usually the complete bowls are predominantly located near the oven, which means in the context that is related to food preparation. What is important to stress, although it's not the case with Belovod and Pločnik, that several examples were found at the necropolis of Gomulava, which indicated this type of bowls had a significant role even in the funeral context. What is specific about Belovod context is that the two vessels were found together, like one was tucked into another. And when discussing traces, so maybe this also created the traces we discussed on the previous slide, because like stacking balls in each other could add to frictions between the walls and the rims and so on. Finally, standardization and uniformity. In order to test the degree of uniformity, metric parameters were calculated for CV values, although we were deprived of comparing the key parameters for uniformity, such as height and capacity. Between these two sides, available ones are also significant, especially the diameter of the shoulder, which most likely represented the key measure for standardization of this vessel, as Jasna already pointed. For each set of accessible parameters, the mean value, standard deviation, and coefficient of variation were calculated. Standard formula is expressed in the following way, but considering that the relatively small number of vessels were analyzed, the corrected coefficient of variation is computed using this equation. The results show somehow remarkable degree of uniformity. For the rim diameters for bellwether, we can see that they're extremely low, it's like below 10%. And also what we can see on the line diagram here, which we see that these results coincide, and that clearly shows that the second measure is crucial in standardizing this category, since at both sides the obtained values almost coincide, similarly to the sites of Vinci Belluberdo and Motus Latina, which Jasna analyzed in detail. When we compare the obtained results for the rim diameters with the data from other contemporaneous sites, we can see they're exceptionally lower. And in order to further examine this relationship between the two most important parameters for this type of vessel, we use scatter diagrams. From the plots, what we can see is a generally tight positive correlation between rim and shoulder diameters for inverted rim bowls from Plochnik, while the same correlation at Belluberdo is quite weak. What is also noticeable here is that examples from Plochnik are larger in size than those from Belluberdo. In the Central Balkans, as we said at the beginning, bowls with inverted rim have been viewed as a material culture trait diagnostic of a Vinci culture, since their occurrence has been specifically linked with Vinci D phase. However, the same form continued to be used during the Neolithic with a slightly modified rim and slightly modified and the addition of handles. So although this is due to the higher degree of fragmentation, we cannot possibly be certain about this, like what kind of, how many actually vessels, how many inverted rim bowls from late Neolithic actually have handles. The question of their use is still a matter of some debate. First and foremost, we argue that their emergence in Vinci D phase of late Neolithic is an issue of key importance. Their size, formal and morphological parameters and characteristics, as well as contextual data, indicate the function related to food consumption. In general, vessels that belong to tableware vessels of this type have a special significance in each community because they reflect the social relationships among the prehistoric groups. The use of bowls with somewhat limited, restricted orifice has been widely documented in prehistoric settlement, mainly in meal distribution, not only in households, like for private feasts, for like small scale feasts, but also for larger events. So given the large accumulations of bowls, we can assume that these accumulations are maybe related to various consumption events, including drinks and foods. For us, the key issue is to identify what caused their greater production in the late Neolithic, whether internal or external events were responsible for their occurrence. Of course, we need to further observations and analyses are needed and necessary before any definitive conclusions. What we can conclude now is that the frequent occurrence, which are undoubtedly the results of high breakage rates, certainly speaks in favor of being an inseparable element of everyday life. Thank you very much. I will conclude here, and I apologize again that at the beginning I didn't share my screen. I forgot to share my screen. I apologize deeply.
Thank you, Maria. So this is very interesting question. So, and thank you for being on time and no need to apologize. This is, this online conference is so difficult for everybody to keep everything in place and make everything smooth. So, so far, I don't see that anybody has any questions for you at the moment. And I'm checking also Facebook, but no questions there. Maybe there's some on YouTube. I can't open everything. So maybe we'll have some questions for you later on. But I just wanted to say, so this is very, very interesting. And despite the fact that we are actually excavating venture culture sites for over 100 years, there's still a lot of things that we absolutely don't know and still need to investigate further. I like very much your presentation. I think this Belovod, the material is magnificent, and I'm seriously looking forward to see your presentation, to see your dissertation, and to see it published. Okay, so we have a short question from Claire Burke. Have you done a residue analysis to see if these shapes were used in similar ways or for communal sets, etc.?
No, unfortunately. Thank you, Claire, for asking this question. Residue analysis haven't been done on any material from Belovod and Pločnik. And what I wanted to write in this discussion and some conclusions part, and my last slide was actually that is the most important what we need, organic residues from this type of bowls. Organic residue analysis that are actually focused on one specific functional class. And I would like to conduct something like that in the future. Thank you, Claire.
So we need a lot of money, for residue analysis to make it. Olga has a question. Is there any correlation between ornaments on the inside and volume of the vessel?
Unfortunately, thank you, Olga. Actually, also a great question. At the moment, no, as I show, and I'm pretty much ashamed that I show just the volume, the capacity measures for 6 vessels here, which are usually, that is not actually something you tend to do and tend to present. You actually strive for more examples and then present them, but I had to show them actually to present them since, as we know, complete vessels are quite rare. No, since they share, there are three examples actually with ornamented that have that I measure capacity on, and that they have incised or polished marks on it. No, I didn't find any correlation. These are really important questions which I want to address in the future on a larger sample.
Well, even if there is no correlation, that is also interesting. Yeah, so anything that you can get is interesting enough. Okay, so thank you. Maybe for the later discussion, somebody will have more comments or questions, and we can now move on to Cucuteni Tripolje. So the next presentation is by Ilya Palagutta on the structure of archaeological and functional assemblages of Cucuteni Tripolje sites. And we will hear first the first part for Cucuteni, Cucuteni A, Tripolje A and B1 periods. Please, everybody who is not presenting at the moment, make sure that your microphones are off, because it creates background noises that are disrupting everybody. Ilya, please, you can share your screen and start your presentation.
Okay, hello. I open my presentation. Okay, sorry. Okay, we will speak together with Elena Starkova about Cucuteni ceramic assemblage, and I took the first part of the culture, the first periods, and she will speak about others, and maybe all the questions we will answer after both reports. Okay, on the structure of archaeological and functional assemblages of Cucuteni Tripolje sites, pre-Cucuteni 8, Cucuteni 8 period. Okay, at first, what can we think about? How can we think about ceramic assemblage? What is ceramic assemblage itself? I think that it might be divided into functional assemblage, set of pottery that used for economic and cultural activities in settlement, and it's a group of pottery that's used in common economic cycle. At primary set of pottery, and I bring an example of popular service Madonna that were popular in Soviet Union. It might be the same as in our life too. And usually we'll deal with archaeological assemblage. It's an aggregate of all archaeological ceramics deposited in the settlement occupation layers during the entire existence period of the settlement. And it can be subdivided by context, by structures, by buildings, pits, cultural layers, and etc. It's an example from Teterevkanova excavation in northern Moldova. Okay, and what about ceramic assemblies? It also have two aspects of studies. Maybe it's production aspect. We study the common and non-common traditions of pottery making, imports and imitations, influence of non-ceramic items and technologies, and organizers of production process. And it's also interesting functional aspect, functional set of pottery, a set of containers made of preserved or non-preserved organic materials, and studies on use life, survivalship of pottery deposition process. It's also an example from ethnographic. Okay, and about archaeological complex, I have some suppositions. As to the depositional process, it is obviously that may be supported the most reconstructible vessels can be belong to the latest phase of settlement objects. Such vessels are usually can be found in situ within the context and dwelling of pit. It is possible for such vessels to be contemporaneously deposited as in closed assemblage. And we have a lot of pottery that come from cultural layers. It is usually fragmented and relocated, and this pottery account depend on deposition of fractures. And such pottery deposited during the whole interval of time of a settlement or layer resistance. These kinds of assemblages are different in content. Okay, we will speak about Cucuteni-Topoli culture. It's the most eastern part of Greek Balkan Carpathian area of Copper Age cultures. Okay, from the first, a functional set of Cucuteni-Topoli formed during the first stages of this culture from the pre-Cucuteni-Topoli, and it includes bowls and plates, pedestal bowls, pots and beakers, synthetic shapes and beaker pot and beaker deep bowl, jars, spoon and ladders. This pottery is usually classified as tableware. It's of better quality. The ceramic mass is of better quality, and in every classification, all the archaeologists who work with the Topoli Cucuteni mark it as tableware. And we have also storage and kitchenware and cauldrons on piphory, pear-shaped vessels, lids, and other forms. Every time its differentiation depends on different kinds of clay mass and of pottery shape, and might be it links with the function. Okay, it's a basic set, and this basic set evolved during the whole existence of Topoli Cucuteni. Functional assemblage formed by the influence of containers of non-preserved organic materials, such as bark and wooden containers. It is possible to see by the decoration. And colored decoration, that is usual for Bayan culture and further Pre-Cucuteni 1, Pre-Cucuteni 2 cultures, made by leather hard conditions of clay and made as wooden decorations. Look like the decoration used for wood or bark materials. And also the influence of non-ceramic containers is possible to see by big storing vessels from Pre-Cucuteni 1, Pre-Cucuteni 2 stages, and with dancing figures of ornament. And this kind of containers might be under the influence of bark or wooden prototypes. Such wooden items are very widely spread in ethnographic materials. Okay. This functional set developed in Pre-Cucuteni 8 and Tripoli B1 period. It also includes bowls, covers, spherical vessels, jars, pots, beakers, binoculars, monoculars, cladons, and piphae, and some combinations, combined forms. Okay, the changes are determined by the development in pottery technology, the process of differentiation of local groups, and the influence of other cultures. And when studying the real archaeological assemblage, I used the accounting of proportion of reconstructible vessels and proportion of vessels which can be reconstructed by rim fragments, by rims. It is better because rims gives possibility to determine shape easily and to account it. Okay, it's an example from Drusovan settlement, dwelling 1. And when we see the diagram, we see that the most popular shapes, the most are bowls, beakers, and kitchenware, cladons, and piphae. And this is the plan of the ground floor and the second floor of the buildings and distribution of pottery. And by other buildings, there were 3 buildings excavated. The percentage of formed times in similar objects are nearly the same. Fragmented vessels are dominated. The most frequent are cladons and piphae and belong to kitchenware, and bowls and beakers. And every dwelling includes from 20 to 35 recoverable or reconstructible vessels. The proportion of the types of reconstructible vessels is not strictly differentiated. It is also the dominance of bowls, cladons, and piphae, and beakers. 3 types of pottery are, 3 types of pottery shapes are dominated. And the same picture is in other settlements that were excavated in northern Moldova. It is an example of Cucunești, where excavation were dominated bowls, beakers, and binoculars. And there are also a lot of number of cladons and piphae that was reconstructible and fragmented bowls. And when we excavated the control level without any building, and it's was an example of an assemblage, maybe garbage on the corner of the settlement, we see a strong dominance of cladons, bowls, and beakers. And other shapes presented in 1, 2 more lightly. Okay. Okay, and when we compare these results for the ethnoarchaeological data, the projects that you also know from West Africa, South and Central America, we see that as a rule, cooking and ceramic vessels use life as short and storage vessels long. And it might be looks like in Tripoli excavations, the dominance of both beakers with short look life with short life are dominated. And when comparing with another kind of assemblage, it's the case of Jura. Jura was excavated in the 1950s and includes mostly complete vessels with a lot of fragments. It was deposited occasionally, maybe it's covered by flood and other reason, and it's a very short life settlement. And we see another distribution. And this assemblage consists of mostly complete vessels, and this assemblage illustrates another pottery type's percentage. And really, we need to compare of different kinds of assemblages. One kind of assemblages, it's a low number of beakers, kitchenware, and bowls, and with the highest percentage of recoverable, reconstructible vessels. And another kind of assemblage that includes a lot of shells. Okay, here's an example of North Moldavian assemblage. And when correlation has done, the correlation between pottery forms and ornamentation give a detailed pottery typology and proves the fact that percentage of certain types of ornaments depends on a number of shapes found, and so on the conditions of material depositing in cultural layer. Okay, and such kind of approach give the possibility to compare sites within a settlement group, micro group of sites, and to understand chronological relations between these sites. An example of studies on Chuguru Valley group. Okay, Jura assemblage is another one. It includes mostly of painting pottery, some series of incised ware that's close to painted pottery, and some of imitations, imitative forms with other fluted ornaments. The structure of this assemblage is another one. When we give correlation between pottery shapes and ornaments, we found another structure. And from the works of Sarvachin, for example, his dividing of local groups of Cucuteni sites of northern Moldova for Dragășeni Jura local variant is not truth, because we have two different kinds of assemblages, two different structures that marks different local variants. Okay, and also in Cucuteni Tripoli we have another component, not common component of ceramic assemblages, about 1% of total amount. In Tripoli Cucuteni B1, Cucuteni A period, it indicates the presence of barriers of non-common traditions. It's Cucuteni C pottery that come from steppe zone. It's really really proves the presence of bearers of another tradition because of pattern annual techniques, imitative decoration, and round bottom tradition. Maybe it's new people that begin to live in Tripoli settlement during Cucuteni A, Tripoli B1 period. And this basic set of pottery will also present during the next periods of Tripoli Cucuteni. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I give.
Thank you. So for the moment, there is no questions for you. Maybe there will be later. And since your two presentations are connected, we can immediately move to Elena, that will deal with later.